All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is Project Veritas. They released a video of a guy who claims to be a director at Pfizer, and he's talking about research or proposed research that they're considering, at least, whether you want to call it gain of function or directed evolution. The idea is that Pfizer will mutate the COVID virus in order to come up with vaccines to address those possible mutations. This is not groundbreaking new technology. It's controversial. Gain of function is controversial. It's not illegal everywhere. And you could very well argue there is a logical foundation for it. Obviously, viruses will mutate anyway on their own. It's not as if you mutating them will bring about mutations that never ever would have happened in the world. But if you do hit upon a mutation that does happen in the real world and get a vaccine ahead of time, one could easily argue that that would be beneficial because then you'd have a vaccine ready to go. Of course, people have very little trust for Pfizer, so some people speculate that, well, what's stopping them from just releasing it out into the wild so that they'll make money? Technically speaking, there are lots of laws, I'm sure, that are stopping them. Not that corporations never break laws, but there's that. I'm not a cheerleader for Pfizer or anything. I'm not here to defend them. But if I were in charge of Pfizer, I wouldn't even feel the need to release a mutation into the wild because, as I said, mutations happen on their own. They will probably just happen, and you will therefore just be early and have a vaccine earlier than, let's say, Moderna would. So I don't think this is evidence that Pfizer is releasing stuff into the wild. I do think that it's very troubling that they're not transparent about these things because, okay, yeah, sure, they know that it's not going to play well in the press necessarily. It's just not good PR. The optics of it are not great. At the same
That
time,
seems like an understatement.
yeah, but at the same time, that's not a reason to hide it. I think that if you want to do it and you do have a solid reasoning to do it, your only option is to be transparent that you want to do it, but also wage a campaign of, education. Argue your side. Just say, no, look, this is a normal type. This is a normal type of thing. It's good because we'll have vaccines earlier. Just keep arguing your point of view because you're not. If there's no malice behind your motivations, then why don't you just argue your point of view and why this, in fact, is a good idea? Just hiding it is kind of a pretty slimy corporate thing. And of course, what you had, the immediate reflex is, and this happens on the left and the right. People just said, no, how do we know he's really a Pfizer executive? I think this is an actor. Okay, it's easy to say that, but he's not an actor. It's been verified on his LinkedIn. And also, Pfizer has not denied that he works there. If there's some bombshell negative news story about your company and the whole underpinning is this guy who doesn't even work at your company, I would think that you would just come out and prove that he doesn't work at your company. That's a pretty easy fix to this whole thing. But they haven't said that. So I believe that he was telling the truth about both his position and also that Pfizer is considering this kind of research. I just heard a lot of dumb arguments, such as this guy looks too young to be the director of something. What are you talking about? First of all, you can't tell how young or old black people are.
So they're only considering it. I thought it was an admission that they're already doing it.
There's a couple audio clips. One clip suggests that they are already doing something, but in another clip, he specifically uses the words they are considering it. So it's not a done deal. So it's ambiguous. I think the audio proves at least, or suggests at least, that they are considering it at the minimum. What I will note, if it were not for gay men on Grindr, I don't think that Project Veritas would have quite the success rate. Because doesn't it seem like a lot of their stuff comes from gay guys who are on dates and are very chatty about their work? Well, just so you know, if you don't know, the vast majority of the time Project Veritas gets these audio clips, it's people who are on date. It's not a work event. How would Veritas have a I guess it's conceivable that they have a work person who's been embedded like a CIA agent for years in Pfizer, and now they're recording this guy and they're going to bust him. But that doesn't make sense because if it were a person who works there, they'd totally be blowing their cover. They couldn't work at Pfizer anymore. Yep. So it's almost always a person who is on a date, and I think more often than not, they're not heterosexual. I think that says a lot. I think that says, I'm not trying to, I don't know. Do you think it says a lot? Well, only about 5% of the population is homosexual. And yet, I think over 50% of the blabbers on Veritas are.
Hmm.
What does that lead? If we were approaching this objectively, what would we conclude from that? Would we conclude that homosexuals are more likely to spill the beans on their dates? I think so.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe it's well, it's also a combination of being in the right position.
Do you think homosexuals generally have higher positions in their organizations?
No, but maybe they're over there's a greater number of them that are in this intersection where they're sort of in a sufficiently high position and yet also vulnerable to this type of attack.
Right.
But
Because
yeah,
if you were a woman in a high ranking position, I don't think I don't know. I'm speaking out of my ass. I'm not a corporate executive or anything like that. I don't work at a tech company, but I don't know that you would go on. No, that's not true. Women go on dates plenty, but maybe they don't talk about, there's not as prone to talk about work. That's my belief.
one thing I don't understand about this is, okay, this is obviously because I lack sort of expertise. Wouldn't you think that mutating the virus in hopes of trying to, stay ahead of the game is just like a losing gamble? I mean, because what are the chances that you mutated the same way as the next natural mutation in the wild?
Right.
That just seems
Maybe, yeah,
highly
maybe it's so unlikely.
unlikely.
But this is the first thing I thought about when I heard this story. I thought, well, that sounds really bad. And of course, the people I follow on Twitter also said, this sounds really bad. Either this is foolhardy and risky and dangerous. And we don't think that Pfizer is purposely releasing stuff into the wild, but just creating it. This sounds like a sci-fi movie gone wrong, right? So why are you even going down that road to begin with? All the
Yeah,
way
well, I
to
mean, how do you know you're not going to be the next Wuhan?
yeah, exactly, because mistakes happen. We're human beings. All the way to people who think that they are going to intentionally release it into the wild. And again, I tend not to believe that's the case. But it didn't sound good at all. It looks bad in every single way. But I wanted to restrain myself in judging it immediately because I don't have a degree in microbiology or pathology, whatever stuff that you need to have a degree in. I don't know how this stuff works. It might be one of those situations where, okay, to the layperson, this sounds super bad. But if you really know this field, it's kind of a normal practice, or it's safer than it sounds, or
Then
it's
why,
just
yeah, then why aren't they defending it?
that's a good question.
Yeah.
That is a good question. Maybe they made the calculation that people would be, anti-Pfizer regardless, and it's just pointless to
Hmm.
defend it. I just wanted to be fair in my initial assessment because I do not know the science fully behind it.
Mhm.
I know roughly how all this works. I know what gain of function is. I know, how vaccines are created. I know a little bit of the stuff. I took science. But maybe it's a thing that sounds bad to the layperson. Like, remember there was that time when people would say something like, hey, did you know that your chicken McNuggets have this, or not McNugget, but some food that you eat, they put this same chemical that's in rubber mats? And you would think, oh, that's terrible. Why are they putting rubber mats in my food? Well, of course, that's not what's happening. There is one single component that is in rubber mats that is also in food as a, preservative or whatever they use it for. And that component is fine to be in food. It's been proven that it's safe. It's just a compound or a chemical or one molecule. It's not like people are grinding up rubber mats and putting in your chicken McNuggets, okay? But the public, they visualize that headline like you are grounding up rubber mats and putting it inside their food, which of course is not what's happening, but that's what they think is happening.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, is this a situation that's similar to that where, yes, it does sound bad, and maybe there are definitely reasons to question the way they went about this. Why are you so secretive? I will say that for sure they handled it incorrectly because I think, especially right now, the way the climate is, how much suspicion, right or wrong, that people have of big pharma. A lot of their suspicions are, I think, they're fair, and a lot of suspicions are, yes, they're crazy and unfounded. But in such a climate, don't you think that you need to have maximum transparency? And even when stuff you're transparent about doesn't look the best, then it's just your responsibility to educate people. Explain to them that, look, we're not putting rubber mats in your food. It's just one chemical component that is in rubber mats that's also here. Just like, there's your engine coolant has water in it, but you can also drink water. It's fine. It doesn't mean because water is used in engine coolant means it can never be used in food. Of course, when you explain that, it's so obvious, right? Of course. But the thing that's in this rubber mat, I don't know what the hell it is. I can barely pronounce it. So it sounds unsafe to me for it to be in my food, but it's not. And it
You,
sounds unsafe to be directing the evolution of viruses, but I wouldn't say it's totally safe, but maybe it's safer than people think.
hmm.
That's at least possible in my mind.
What do you think about the way they pretty much got into this confrontation later, right? What do you think about that whole episode?
Oh yeah, so after he's outed and James O'Keefe approaches him to bust him, he gets very emotional and aggressive and tries to destroy their tablet and all this. And I can understand. It's a lot to take in, and you know that your life is forever changed. And are you losing your job? Probably should not attack anybody or try to destroy their equipment, especially since that does nothing. It's not as if they don't have footage here because you destroyed their tablet. But I think that some people, the contrarians would say, "Oh, that's just bad acting." But I mean,
I mean, I
I
feel like my interpretation is the obvious interpretation, which is he must think that what he revealed was pretty bad, or else why did he have such a
yes, if he's not an actor, I think that definitely suggests that he thinks at least that he just revealed something that is very bad for him and his company, and that's why
to
he's
jump
so
out in front of a
emotional
car to try to stop
about
it?
it.
It's like,
Yeah. And for the people
what's
who say that, oh, this is such obvious overacting, I would say perhaps this is controversial, but I have gay friends, and I'll just put it this way: it's not overacting. This is entirely believable. Nothing against it. I'm not saying it's a bad trait. I'm just saying they tend to be a little bit extra and dramatic. And so,
flamboyant.
yes. So this response, I think it fits. It feels like a genuine response to me. I don't think it's bad acting. And if it is acting, which I think we've established it's not, if it is acting, then it's pretty decent acting. Here's the other thing. How could it be an actor? If you hired an actor to do this, what other things can he act in the future? Your ambition is to act in your life from here to probably, I would assume, retirement. If you pretend to be a Pfizer executive in this Project Veritas video, it's not like you can go do Macbeth tomorrow, right?
No, but he could do the I'm gay for pay. He could help out with that.
But they said he's acting though. That would suggest he's an actor, right?
Well, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like the boyfriends for hire.
Yeah, but that's not what actors want to do. They
Okay,
want to
but
be in
you could
movies.
get paid.
You can get paid. Yeah. People can get paid. They can go work at McDonald's. Sure. He can work. I'm not saying he will not be able to feed himself in the future, but if you have had any ambitions of being in movies and, being famous, which most actors do, I know actors too, and they all have this ambition. You can't do that. People will say, "Hey, aren't you the doctor from the Project Veritas video?" Boom. The end.